All right, we're live. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thanks for coming to Once Upon a Time in London. My name is Harry Nijja, your host today. Jan, co-hosting. Jan, how's it going?
Good, thank you. My name's Jan Kodabash. So you guys probably already know who I am. Work for Universal Technology Solutions, and we have random chats here every Friday. So welcome again.
Yeah, welcome. Thanks, everybody, for joining. We've got a couple of special guests with us, Nithen and Stephan. Nithen, can you introduce yourself briefly to the audience?
Hi, everybody. My name is Nithen Naidoo. I'm the CEO and founder of Snode Technologies, based out of South Africa. Talking to you guys from Hanoi, Vietnam tonight.
Amazing. And Stephan?
Hi, everybody. So Stephan, also based in South Africa, currently in Pretoria, and CTO at Snode Technologies, so heading up the engineering department and tackling cyber threat detection.
Cool. Awesome. I guess, as you can gather from the way we describe this talk today, it's going to be security related. We actually opened up the conversation around security MDR. What is this? And I kind of want to start with this, if everyone's comfortable. And actually, Jan, do you want to start? Because actually, you messaged me on WhatsApp saying, I want to talk about this. So I think it's good for you to start.
So me and Nithen in particular, we go back a while, and he introduced me to this company a while ago, and just as we were picking up new products ourselves to introduce to customers, and it was a really interesting proposition. Although we're going to talk about MDR, actually, Snode Technologies themselves have a wider product set and SOC as well, which again, from my perspective, was really interesting to have expertise brought in who actually understand the kind of security landscape. So as I'm going about talking to people, I'm seeing that they're obviously becoming more aware of it, and they seem to have a very good proposition that I thought, you know what, come on the show, let's have a chat, and we can fire some questions to them live and get a wider audience to ask some questions as well.
Amazing.
I mean, maybe Nithen, you could just give a quick overview of Snode, or Stephan. Tell us a little bit about what you guys do. Maybe a 1 or 2 minute overview.
No,
sure.
Perfect. Go for it.
All right, go for it. Yeah.
All right. So I think from Snode Technologies side, we started I think Nithen started probably 10 years ago, and he was doing pen testing essentially, so just consulting based. And the idea stemmed to, is it good enough to only get a point-in-time assessment once every year and then start looking at fixing vulnerabilities? I think in today's day and age, you need almost a real-time reaction because your threats are so dynamic. And that's where Snode Guardian spawned from. So monitoring of traffic, monitoring of threats, and giving you that real-time view of what kind of vulnerabilities and what kind of attacks could be attacking your environment. So from our point of view, we started off the journey with building a product, Snode Guardian, which enables us to do that. I think as soon as we started launching that, we realized very quickly that now that we've got all this visibility, our customers don't know what to do with that, and they don't necessarily have the expertise to analyze these threats and then also remediate them properly. So we started a 24/7 SOC, which is essentially a MDR component, so managed detection and response. We deliver this separately and with the technology itself. And then by using the technology, you're essentially enabling a remote team to monitor and to respond to threats on customer networks.
Thanks for that. And what I'd like to add, I did a post previously where we get engaged a lot is from the network side or telecommunications side. And we would generally be providing the transit to where these type of products sit. But what interests me, I did a post to say that network engineers are also security engineers. We're the kind of first point of call. And I'm not sure if a lot of where I've seen products like this sit, it usually sits in the security kind of area of an organization, and they would look at it. But I think products like this have so much information that the network teams themselves could use to kind of familiarize themselves firstly about threat protection, but also there's a lot of activity that goes on, and I'm not sure why a lot of places don't have this from a network perspective to give them visibility. So I definitely will look, if you know, to kind of see this being accessible, at least from even just from a visibility perspective to networking teams. Do you guys just see this usually when it's put in a tooling position in an infosec side, or do you see it adopted wider for more visibility in the teams?
So I think in generally we almost get bought or procured from the security side, but as soon as the IT team starts seeing the kind of value, seeing the visibility in, let's say, latency or response times to websites, seeing certain links that might drop at certain times or packet loss between certain links, then they can start using this as well to dive deeper into these. I think a lot of if you look at anomaly detection and heuristic-based detection, a lot of that actually flags some IT systems going down potentially, because you're seeing different connections, you're seeing different patterns now. For example, a web server that is always responding 200 is now responding 500 internal server error. So they start using that investigating their IT systems as well.
Yeah, and I'm seeing a lot of, from a network perspective, where they're using, whether it's automation or AI intelligence to kind of consolidate alerts so they can give, one clear picture of what the problem is. However, having also access to this allow them to give it a bit more, furnish that information to be a bit more rich at all levels. So even looking at it from a security perspective. So yeah, but this kind of brings me on to one of the things I wanted to talk about to start off with was like, and I don't know if this is even a word, over tooling, and seeing where companies have so many tools that do so many things like this. Is it now consolidating? Are having tools like, for example, that some of your products, is it allowing them to kind of decouple some of the things that they currently have running?
Look, I think in terms of over tooling, I think the key there is that there is lots of tools that are built for purpose and they're probably best in class at what they do. I think what happens too many times is that people see a problem, they get sold a silver bullet that will solve this problem, but the implementation lacks from either the IT or the security side. So they end up, okay, we've bought this tool now, we've implemented it, and now we're moving on, okay, but we still have another problem. So they end up buying many different tools, all attempting to solve the same problem, instead of just focusing on implementing that tool to its best effort. Now, using a technology like ours, you can consolidate some of it, but I think you still need your specialist tools to deliver in specific areas.
So just while we do this, so that we kind of focus a little bit before some of the questions on a typical setup of, say, for example, where you would use your MDR technology. How would it be set up, if you can give us a quick overview for an organization?
So I think in general, a typical deployment would look like where we'll deploy an appliance somewhere at if we're looking at like a small, medium enterprise, maybe 650 people, a single site, they'll have a core switch that's linked up to the firewall, and then firewall kind of blocks public access inwards. So our appliance would be connected to that core switch so that we can see all traffic going in and out of the network, as well as traffic traversing the different networks within the enterprise network. So from there, we'll then be able to detect if there's maybe command and control, so malware traffic flowing out, or attacks coming in that the firewall is maybe not blocking, or if there's anomalies based on internal types of connections. So maybe people within the finance sector, why are they accessing IT resources? Or why is an IT person pulling finance reports, for example? So we generally could be positioned there so that we see as much traffic as possible.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I'm familiar with that type of setup then, and there's things where where you spam ports, or you would have either passive taps that actually pass the information to a product like yourselves. Now, we now have seen with a rise in people working from home, an expansion of the operating landscape for organizations. How does that affect having, being able to kind of feed that information to you when it's grown globally now, shared office spaces. What kind of solution do we see? Has it changed? Well, obviously, because now you've got to see right down to the edge. How does that work?
I agree. I think I think post-COVID, it kind of accelerated that, but I think the plan was probably always for you almost eliminating your enterprise network. But I mean, there's probably at the moment two architectures or two main architectures. The one is people still VPN into the office network, and from there they break out to their internal cloud services, or they're connecting directly to these SaaS applications. Now, tool like ours, how you cover that is you just then pull logs from those cloud services, or you cover the cloud itself with virtual sensors or virtual taps in essence. So, I mean, you're just basically moving where most of the data sits at the moment.
Right.
Yeah, so I think there's a big, I think you probably need both network and to be on the endpoint itself, because people are taking devices home. And if they're not connected on the internet, if they're not connected on the VPN, then you won't know about it from our perspective. But that's where your kind of endpoint detection tools then lie, where you're deploying an agent on a laptop.
All right. Okay. So does your product set also include agent-based software?
So we have a very small portion of agent-based software, but it is more to direct traffic towards our sensors. We're not like a conventional, an EDR or an antivirus, where we're really focusing on the endpoint kind of detection, where we're looking at malicious processes. I think as a company, we're focusing on the network layer. We leave that to the people that are focusing solely on endpoints. And I think there's very good products in that space as well. But then from a SOC or an MDR point of view, what we would want to do is onboard those logs and those data sets as well. So if we can see that an endpoint, a trigger from an EDR for malware was found on a specific endpoint, and we can now see that that endpoint is behaving differently as soon as it connects on the network, we can either invalidate that, so almost NAC, so don't allow that device on the network, or we can then just keep a closer eye on that device, for example.
Right. Okay. So the product set actually works quite well with others' endpoint detection products as well, which is quite interesting. No.
So our goal is to consolidate your security data in essence. So our core detection relies around network traffic, but then adding all these other contextual layers like vulnerability data, endpoint data, cloud logs, access logs, those kinds of things gives context to what we're seeing. And if your SOC or your MDR solution can monitor one platform and they don't need to log into 3-4 different platforms to get this view, I think it enables them to respond a lot faster.
Right. Okay. So Harry, I mean, you've probably got some type of antivirus on your PC at home. I mean, how far would you take security? Would you do you kind of subscribe to something yourself?
Security wise, I don't have anything on top of what's already kind of available tool wise. But obviously, as a small business, as a small marketing agency, we're kind of limited on our exposure, I guess, compared to most big companies. And there's no one trying to cyber attack me right now.
Well, not that you know, not yet.
Not that we know. But I think it's interesting, right? I think security, we don't really take notice of it or think about it until something's gone wrong, right? When something happens, that's when suddenly, what do we do? It's always kind of a reactive thing. So for me, part of these talks and part of the content is, how can we be proactive around it? How can we educate ourselves on what is sustainable for your business? Because at the end of the day, it's like insurance, taking out the right insurance. Will a company pay loads of money to do the security enablement? Is it adequate for what they need, basically?
Well, so now that I think when you look at security teams compared to network teams in organizations, the security teams can take up a whole floor. So you can see how the shift has gone from how serious companies are taking it. It's very serious. And the compliance required, I mean, we'll often do compliance training and, to make sure that you're in line with the security posture of a specific organization. So you know, Stephan, Nithen, there's as you know, there's a lot of products out there already that do this, so we're getting constantly flooded. These guys, these people who make the decisions there, they're going to want to know what the differentiators are of the products. When you go in, what is it about the analysis that you guys do or the analytics that you guys do that's going to, you know, stand you out from the rest of them? I'm looking at it just from a network perspective. You know, I can see, I want to see all this info, but that's just network capturing data. What else do you guys do that would, that kind of make you stand out?
Dave, you want to take it?
I think go for it, Nitz.
Okay, so we tend to see security slightly differently. I think, you know, we were having a conversation earlier, you and I, and we were talking about signature-based detection and deep packet inspection. And it was amazing the sort of the variance in our thought process there.
Yeah.
We tend to deviate from the norm, and but not in the sense just to be different, right? But to innovate. So very simply, I think signature-based detection was great in the 80s and 90s, where the problem was more explicit. There was a limited amount of threats you were chasing, and you know, it was possible to develop signatures for all the malware. I don't think that's possible. It hasn't been possible for the last 10, 20 years to do that, because the amount of activity, the threat landscape has become so dynamic, so diverse, so multifaceted. To think you're going to develop signatures for every sort of attack vector, I think we needed a better way of detection. So initially, like in 2009, 2010, 2011, we started experimenting with mathematics, specifically Bayesian mathematics. And we started understanding that through math. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a mathematician. Through math, we could achieve higher degrees of accuracy and just superior threat detection. And, you know, this kind of collective consciousness is where you saw the birth of a new type of detection and analytics, you know, that sort of came to the fore in about 2015, 2016, you know, through a lot of companies that just felt like, you know, the space lacked innovation. So I think taking your signature-based detection and augmenting it with machine learning, artificial intelligence, or Bayesian mathematics, or just mathematics and statistical analysis in itself, is really the sort of defense posture that we were pushing, or that we were like early protagonists of. I think today conversation changed, right? Because we had another big disagreement before we went live, where you were saying, you know, I think you need to decrypt, etc., and perform deep packet inspection in the packets and look inside the packets and see the attacks. And I said, no, I actually see it differently. Even though you are right, that is the way 99.9% of the technologies see the problem and the solution relationship right now. You know, again, the divergence, right? I don't see it that way. I think, you know, I think your data is more secure staying encrypted. As a matter of fact, there's this thing called polymorphic encryption. Polymorphic encryption allows it's sort of like the holy grail of encryption. And it's like the data never gets decrypted. I think it's possible to find attacks in ciphered streams without decrypting it or even needing to look inside the packet. I'm not alone. Steph feels the same. So much so, Snode patented this capability. It's patented across multiple countries. And it's patent pending in the US for exactly that, threat detection in ciphered communications. I don't think you should open up your secrets in the name of security. I think your secrets should stay secret. And I think you should be able to secure those communications without having to actually disclose them. And that's like a big differentiator. It's these kinds of differentiators in our thinking. It's that divergence that we're bringing into the market that's setting us apart from traditional vendors. I mean, signature-based detection is 30, 40 years old. You know, how have the attackers managed to innovate and move forward, etc.? And, you know, as an industry...
You know what? It makes total sense what you're saying. Although, when I say it makes total sense, it's great that you wouldn't have to decrypt because that's an exposure in itself. But also what I think is that also, if it's doable, and obviously it is, with was it polymorphic decryption? I want to use that word actually. I want to try and look it up and use that's a good one. But it will then allow people to reduce, be more cost effective, because now what we're saying here is that we won't need decryption devices. We won't need our firewalls to perform deep packet inspection to unencrypt data. That's a big cost saving, and so it's a good selling point for from my perspective. I'm always looking at reducing any hardware footprint if we don't need it, if something else is doing it. We've got to be progressive. But I must admit, I can't. I've always thought, and that you're totally right, needing to be inside the payload to determine some of those activities. But maybe that's something that I need to be educated on, and I'm sure we'll. Yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry. I just wanted to make it's fully homomorphic encryption. It's not polymorphic. Sorry, polymorphic is a ability in the attack scenario to change it's fully homomorphic encryption.
Right. Yeah. But do you see what I'm saying? So now that we're able to remove, say, external hardware decryptors or software decryptors, our devices can perform better, and also it's a cost saving. So why not? So yeah, I think that's a good selling point on that part, especially if we're able to keep the same, or maintain the same security posture and compliance that's required. That's a win-win.
I actually think in some ways you extend your security posture. So research has shown that decryption, like SSL interception, and sharing your keys with these various devices, sharing encryption keys is just a bad idea in general. Assuming that because it's a security appliance like a firewall or a VPN, thinking it's infallible to have like a security issue of its own, where it can get we spoke about trusted platform modules and cryptographic keys that are kept on those. A couple of days ago, there's a buffer overflow attack, or two buffer overflow attacks in TPMs, which allow the encryption keys to be disclosed. I think
because you're right. TPMs, they use encryption keys. Yeah.
So I think sometimes complexity can be the enemy of security. I think simplifying things. I think also we're trapped in our ways, and it's like you said, the over tooling conundrum. The marketing drives the solution, not the problem we're trying to solve.
So can I push you a little bit more, maybe from a firstly educate Jan perspective, but also on this level, could you give me an example of maybe where previously we were needing to do packet deep inspection, but now how have we turned that into, now we don't actually need to do this because this is what we're looking for in this type of attack, which allows us to actually detect it just as well. Yeah.
So
I didn't need to put you on the spot here, but I'm just trying to.
No. You're not bringing me on the spot at all.
From my perspective, also, I want to just be able to understand that point a bit more.
No. I think deep packet inspection has its place. I think it's like antivirus. Saying antivirus is redundant today, I think is a bit of a stretch. It has its place in a more diverse sort of defense strategy. Deep packet inspection has its place. It offers value. I'm not saying it doesn't offer value, but I think SSL interception on a perimeter device in the name of security, and then decryption on the internal environment, assuming it's trusted, is, that's not true anymore. I think you open yourself up to more vulnerability. and greater risk, unnecessary risk exposure, I think you can get the same performance through analytics. I'll give you a simple example. Any form of enumeration is fairly explicit, sure, but you can use statistical analysis like volumetric analysis, frequency analysis to detect, a port scan, something as simple as a port scan.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you can't explicitly define, hey, you know what, when 30 ports are connected to under, 10 seconds, I'm being port scanned. No, of course, you can have those explicit definitions, but statistical analysis offers you a better way.
Right.
Perfect example of that. Sorry, Jan, I didn't mean to interject. Go for it.
No, go ahead.
Perfect example of that is attackers today use attack patterns we call low and slow. So to defeat explicit definitions of a port scan, I would port scan just above that threshold. So I'd make sure that I only do, I think I use 30 ports in 10 seconds. I'd make sure I do 29 in 10 seconds. And therefore, I do not trigger your threshold-based, explicitly defined defense mechanisms. Now, the way Steph does port scan detection using statistical analysis, machine learning, etc., even if you come in low and slow and you do a port a day, keeping in mind there's 65,535 ports on one system, you're going to be scanning your entire lifetime. So the cost of attack is way too high to consider. Steph's platform can still detect that as being a port scan.
Right.
Explicitly, that's never going to be defined that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think I get that part. And maybe, for example, maybe that's something, we'll probably have to come back and cover in a bit more detail. Steph, I'd really like to, sit with you and, get on the dashboard at some point and see some of this. Because I really think that, okay, I'm interested in that part because it makes the product a lot more agile. And, companies can be a lot more flexible by looking at it in that way. Can I ask, do you find yourself having to explain that in a bit more detail to companies, or are they already a lot more aware of that progression in the market?
I think the progression in the market is going that way. I think with the prevalence of ML AI, everybody is punting it. Nobody really knows what it is. But at the end of the day, it almost comes back to statistical analysis and looking at analyzing behavior and what it was and where it is now. So people want it, they know they need it, they just don't really understand necessarily exactly how it works. And I think that's perfectly fine, because I don't understand how ChatGPT necessarily works in its core, but I could probably still use it if I'd want to. So, but I think the general market shift has been going on for probably 5-6 years now, where people are getting educated in terms of signatures is not enough. We have to start looking at behavioral analysis in order to detect, especially zero-day threats or the likes of ones that we don't know about. And with the changing landscape and the dynamic, just way of how attackers are going through networks these days, you can't just rely on what you know. You have to rely on either patterns of behavior or looking at the internal network and seeing if your internal network is behaving differently, because that might indicate something malicious is going on.
So I'm conscious of the time as well, but one of the things I wanted to bring up is the kind of data governance of just once you're analyzing this data, where people have, say, for example, a Snode product or Snode analysis, that I'm sure people have asked you, well, look, where does my data go for you to analyze, and how does it actually get there? And even once it gets there, who's holding it? That's always going to be a concern for people. Could you just talk a little bit about that? You can see what I'm saying. It's more, how does it get there? When it's there, how are you protecting it? Because you're probably doing it, multi-tenant solutions. That's going to be a big concern.
we're trying to keep, especially on, so just going back to the network data, we don't take the raw network data. If I can take an analogy, we only take the metadata. So it's almost like if you send an email, what I'd know is the sender, the receiver, maybe the subject, and the message ID. I won't know the body. I'd know that there's 2 attachments. I won't know what's in the attachments, for example. So again, only looking at the headers and the data around the data, so only the metadata. When we ship that up, it is in a fully encrypted tunnel, and then we host that within our cloud. I think in today's age, people are comfortable with putting data in the cloud as long as they know that the company they're putting it with is trusted. We do offer multiple options of deployment as well. So it can be hosted completely on premise as well, where if the company, especially like in the banking sector or the defense sectors, wherever they would prefer their data and they have complete ownership of their data, then we can host it in an isolated environment as well. But yeah, and I think from that side, we do not allow commingling of data. So customer data is not commingled, even though it is a multi-tenant system. Each customer has completely separate, you can almost think of it as disks where the data sits. They don't sit in the same databases. It's different instances of databases. So the data is not shared.
And so you do offer the solution where it can also be kept on-prem if needed, but the operators have access to it in terms of just to kind of alert and so on based on that.
Yes, exactly. So the option is there.
Oh, right. Okay. That's because, yeah, that's definitely going to be on the forefront of a lot of teams. They have, you know, depending on what organization, but they've got policies and governance around it.
Exactly.
So I know I said we're going to overrun. I know we've overrun a little bit, but can I ask you from what are you guys looking at from a next, you know, what's the next generation of this technology that you guys are, I mean, from what you can share anyway, looking at?
Go for it, Nitz. You're the visionary here.
I think when you're using mathematics and analytics in the way we're using it, and you're relying on metadata is in everything, Jen. It's in a photograph, it's in a tweet. A tweet has it's crazy. It has 32 sort of metadata points. So what people are starting to use the Snode technology for is predicting when a crowd of people would turn violent. So violent protest and proactive policing. We're using it to find, you know, kidnap victims. We're using data essentially to solve social evils like human trafficking, terrorism, crime, things that are social evils that affect us all. Because you have this digital twin, or you have this digital parallel, or the digital landscape, and it's only going to get better, bigger, and more converged with the metaverse and the emerging technologies and the fourth industrial revolution. The ability to take any data stream, analyze it without compromising anyone's privacy, and being able to predictively identify any form of negative risk, whether it's fraud, crime, or cyber attack, is a really, really powerful machine. And this is the vision for Snode. We wanna help the world use data to solve social evils and just make the world a better place, right?
Okay. And that's, you know, I mean, I'd like to end it there, but you mentioned something here that's quite interesting, is that when we look at data to that level, is there kind of like an ethical play in that, where you want to be able to detect those, you know, norms or anomalies from or threats in people's messaging or, you know, communications, but how do you also keep it that people do have we have to maintain their privacy as well. So how do we stop ourselves becoming like a big brother state? Yeah, how do organizations do that, but still manage to have that ability to protect as well? Is that always difficult?
The honest answer to that is it is difficult. It's a balancing act. The same technology that we use to detect election tampering could be used for election tampering. And it really, I guess the best way I can answer that question, Jan, it's the technology is the gun, but the human being pulls the trigger. And a lot of this technology is here to augment what we do. And there are some sort of ethical considerations around the technology we build. And you know, there's some liability that lives with us as the creators to ensure that it doesn't get used for nefarious purposes. And you know, I think that's more of a gray area.
Yeah.
You know, we have cybersecurity technology like that was built by the NSO group that then gets used by countries to track journalists. You know, and you know, you've got Crypto AG was a firm selling encryption software that turned out to be an intelligence agency. Crypto AG was used across the world for the better part of 40 years. And, you know, it's instead of giving them security, it was actually security. It was, you know, wolf in sheep's clothing, essentially. I think the best way to look at technology is looking at it as a gun, and just ensuring that you take the responsibility that comes with its creation and make sure that it never gets into the wrong hands, and that it's used in the most ethical and positive manner. I'm not a pessimist. I'm an optimist around that. Yeah.
I think you've also given me a headline for a future show, and it definitely should. I think it was the technology is the gun and it's the human is the trigger, or something like that. Harry, we've got to caption that. That's got to be one of our next shows we do. You know,
actually,
I love that
absolutely
one.
true. I mean, humans dictate. You are absolutely right with that. Like social media, all tools in the world, humans dictate it, right? You know, you can be used for positive or negatives.
Yeah.
So, but then the great thing is, does the tool? I guess the argument is the tool making the world better, right? So in your world, is your tool enabling things to happen that wouldn't normally happen? But you know what? The one takeaway I think I have with what you described is, I guess your challenge is proving that your vision and the way you're going to deliver it is better than what currently exists. So, you know, with other vendors going down a different route and you going down how hard is that challenge going to be to prove, or that vision going to be to prove successful, do you think?
You know, that hasn't been the biggest challenge, because I think, you know, being an African firm, these social evils and injustices are something that, you know, probably plagues our continent the most. Coming from South Africa, I mean,
yeah,
you know, I don't like to, you know, I'm definitely, South Africa is a beautiful place, but it's a fact that we, you know, we have a high crime rate. So it's not unusual for a group of young people to want to develop a technology around crime prediction and, you know, trying to solve the problems that we ourselves are exposed to. I think the biggest problem is getting the tech into the right hands. It's not that, you know, we're not trying to prove we're better than our competitors. If there's a competitor for predictive policing, hey,
you want them to win.
Let him win. We want to solve the problem. We're not interested in who solves the problem. We want the problem solved.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And you know, in Africa, you know, you talk about things like human trafficking. This is not we're not here to make money. We're not here to play heroes either. I welcome anybody who wants to solve that problem to come help us solve that problem. It's not about convincing everybody that we're the best solution. It's about working and collaborating together to find a solution. And I think that's the most important thing. For us, the most difficult thing has been getting the technology into the right hands, the people who need it. How do you get this technology, you know, to the first responder, medical responder, so they know where's the beds, they know where's the medicine. And these are sort of the problems we face in countries like Africa when you've got a natural disaster. You know, how do you get it to the police so that inside a police station, it's telling them, hey, listen, there's a potential riot about to break out here, or there's a potential shooter, you know, posting on social media. I think that's been the challenge, is how do we get the technology to the people who need it? and how do we empower them, and augment what they do with technology and better use of data.
You know what it is? It's I'll finish on this. Is that almost security? I've always thought of it as a defensive thing. Actually, this is almost turning it on the offense. Turning it into something, a tool to actually make an impact in the other way. So it's kind of really interesting. It's opened my mind up actually quite a lot.
And look, you know what, Nithen, Stephan, I'm looking forward to working with you guys here on the ground. And I think the product's excellent. And you guys, it's been fun to work with you guys. I mean, Nithen, we've gone back a few years now, but hopefully we can bring this to help some organizations, maybe not from a trafficking perspective, but certainly from a cyberspace, which is very, very much in the forefront of a lot of organizations' mind here. And get some more conversations going. Please, after the show, in the comments, leave some details or references for yourselves so that people can contact. They'll always contact me or Harry. Just want to get in contact with you. I know you're on LinkedIn, but thanks a lot for coming on the show. Let's do another one like this in the near future as well.
We know what we're going to do. We're going to come armed with scenarios next time. We're going to come armed with stories and we'll be like, what would you do in this instance? What would you do in that instance?
We'll need more time.
Incredible answers. Incredible thoughts.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Awesome.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Harry.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care.
Cheers. Bye.